Hi, my name is Michelle, and this is my presentation for developmentally appropriate practice. Developmentally appropriate practice is a form of teaching students in a usually early childhood educated classroom, ages birth through age 8 or 9, depending on what age they are in third grade. It's rather open-ended with clearly defined goals to meet children at their level and base the curriculum based on the interest in the class. It's often centered around play. It's centered around play to be fun and engaging, and Albert Einstein refers to play as the highest form of research. And it's an important aspect to build into any pedagogy as a way of keeping children engaged and focused. So Henninger tells us in our textbook that there are two main types of play that are broken down between cognitive and social play. Each of these are broken down in 4 or 5 categories, which roughly correlate based on age and each other. Functional play, or when children are learning what their bodies do, like where their hands and feet are, and they're learning how to, start moving and crawling and walking. Construction play is when they're building on those gross motor skills to learn how to use the fine motor skills to apply their skills that they've already learned. Dramatic play, they really start to interact with others, or they could do this on their own, but often with others, and they'll reenact scenes from their everyday lives or imaginary games as they get older. And as they get to 7 and they learn cooperative and competitive games, that's based on the rule-based learning over in cognitive play, because it's really hard to play sports when you don't know how to follow rules or take turns with other students, children. So when using DAP, the developmentally appropriate practices to build curriculum, you'd want to understand Bell's and Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. You'd want to use these to build your curriculum. Vels tends to break their age ranges into more specific categories, such as 0 to 12 months for infants. Young toddlers are 9 to 18 months. Older toddlers, a year and a half to 3 years. Younger preschoolers, 3 to 4 years. Older preschoolers, 4 to 5, and so on based on grade level as they enter school. And the theory of multiple intelligences, Howard Gardner tells us that there are 8 main ways that people learn. They could learn linguistically, logic mathematically, spatially, musically, bodily kinesthetics, interpersonal, naturalistic, or are the main 8 ways that they would come together to form the different ways that you could teach students. Ways that we can implement developmentally appropriate practices. Well, first you got to determine what interests your students. Do they like to go out and play in nature, or would they rather watch PJ Masks? Then you need to identify the goals, like what do you intend to teach? What is your goal with each lesson? What are the VELs, the Vermont Early Learning Standards, and how can they apply to your lesson? And how can you use the theory of multiple intelligences to incorporate different learning styles into your teaching? We also have to remember how old each child is, or the class as a whole. Because if you're planning an activity that's too young for them, then they're going to be bored and finding their own things to do outside of what you're planning to teach them. But if it's too difficult for them, then they're going to become very frustrated and might act out as a result. Some examples of developmentally appropriate play include mirror play as an infant. You could use a mirror and the infant could watch their reflection. They could see their body moving in the mirror and try and figure out how to make that happen again, which is kind of how they use it in like dance studios or gymnastic studios. They have mirrors on one wall generally so that you can see what you're doing different from the teacher can see what you need to change also. Other children or infants also might say, hey, that's moving the mirror, and turn to look to see if it's happening behind them. Or they'll see it happen, and then they'll have to turn it back in the mirror and see if it's still there. Another way you could do that is to incorporate water play into your classroom activities. There's a whole lot to learn there. It could be solitary or parallel play. As children are learning to use objects such as cups or even strainers, little toys with holes in the bottom to strain things through. They'll want to see how they pour differently, how the water falls. Is it different if I pour it from a low height versus a higher height? Or if they throw it, it will all fall differently. You could also incorporate planting a garden. A lot of kids get excited about working with the dirt and getting dirty. They'll, like enjoy poking holes in the dirt and putting the seed in and then covering it back up again. It might lead to questions about what different seeds come from what plants. Do different plants need different types of water or amounts of water? Or what kind of sunlight? How much sunlight? What does a plant need to grow? And then the parachute games were a really popular one for older kids because there's different ways you can use the parachute to either just bounce the ball in the air or roll the ball along the outside. And children have to learn how to work together in order to make this happen. If there's children that aren't participating, it's going to be really difficult to make the ball do what you want it to do. And that concludes my presentation on developmentally appropriate practices. Thank you for your time.